Welcome to Season 3 of Writing in the Tiny House. We spent Seasons 1 and 2 building an entire library of episodes that you can reference regarding tips and tricks and advice on how to write fiction. For Season 3, we are taking a different approach. We are rolling up our sleeves and we are diving into short stories that have been in the public domain as a way to demonstrate what this entire process can look like. For Season 3, we are doing collections of episodes all regarding one short story, including a reading that I will be doing for you, and then a few more episodes after that where we have a guest and we discuss the various different things about that short story that work and may not work, so that you can learn what to look for in your own writing to become a better writer. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Writing in the Tiny House. Welcome to the discussion episodes of this series on Agatha Christie's The Plymouth Express Affair. A reading of this short story is Season 3, Episode 2, so be sure not to miss that. I am Devin Davis. I am the host of this show, and I am also a fantasy author. And I am here with Chrissy Barton, who will be joining me throughout this series.
Hey there, I'm Chrissy Barton. I'm a certified copy editor and owner of Little Syllables Editing, and you can find me at littlesyllables.com. While Devin and I share a love of literature, I think you deserve to know that we are also lifelong friends.
So welcome aboard this in-depth analysis of Agatha Christie's The Plymouth Express Affair. This discussion is about to leave the station. Okay, and welcome back. Here we are with our second episode on the deep dive of The Plymouth Express Affair by Agatha Christie. And I am joined by Chrissy Barton. Chrissy,
Hello.
say hi. Hey. Today, Chrissy, what are we going to be talking about?
Today we're going to be talking about the characters in this story.
Okay, and roughly how many characters are in this short story?
Well, if we're talking major characters, I would say about 5.
Yeah, I guess
living
there's
ones.
Right, living ones, or if you don't include Alex Simpson, RN, in the Hook.
Yeah.
Right, the guy who is mentioned and then disappears half a page into it.
Right.
We don't need to
And
bring him up.
there are a fair number of characters that are mentioned but never actually seen in the story as well.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, cool. So with this, who is the star of the show?
Of course, it's Poirot.
Yeah, Poirot. And who is this gentleman?
Oh, he is a detective or something. He's Belgian. I know that just from reading other Poirot books. I don't know if it's relevant, but he has some sort of history working in law enforcement or whatever in Belgium or France or someplace. He knows a lot of people in high places as well, which you get in this story. He talks about a royal visit in France when he saw the victim or something.
Right.
Did you catch that? Yeah.
Yeah, and he also knows the current affairs of that one duke, or the Count de la Rochefort.
Oh, yes, the Count.
Like, he just knows what he's doing.
So he obviously knows people and he keeps up on that sort of thing. He is also big on thinking rather than doing.
What does that mean?
I mean, he uses his brain to figure things out rather than sometimes he'll go out and actually look at places, but for the most part, he just interviews people and gathers all of his thoughts, and then he sits and he thinks and uses his little gray cells and figures it out.
Those little gray cells, as opposed to Sherlock Holmes, who is depicted doing experiments.
Right. You don't see Poirot out there with his magnifying glass or stabbing
a pig carcass,
or stabbing a pig
or shooting up with cocaine. I mean, that doesn't have anything to do with anything. But
Right. You don't see Poirot doing that. He likes his drinking chocolate and his comfortable chair and
and
his
his
mustaches
magnificent
and
mustaches.
yes. Yeah.
No, I love that. So he is the star of the show, but he is not the narrator. And we will get into
No.
the narrator a little bit later. But one of the this was a little bit harder for me to get through. One of the major players of this. So we're going to talk about spoilers in this episode just because somebody dies, and we're going to talk about Mr. Halliday, Ebenezer Halliday. His daughter is found stabbed to death on a train. It's interesting, and when I say interesting, I mean it bugs me. So the way that we come to know Ebenezer Halliday is Mr. Halliday, I should call him that because that's how they refer to him in the story, sends a little summons to Mr. Poirot and Monsieur Poirot. And Poirot shows up to his residence to interview and to gather some information on the deceased's estate, on their money, on their jewelry, on, the whole situation of the scene of the crime, the whole thing. And
Right.
apparently Ebenezer Halliday is a heavy hitter in America. He is a millionaire, which in 1920 standards is like a mega billionaire. And I don't remember how he got his money. Let's see, the Steel King of America. So
Yeah,
he has
steel.
Yep. So he is a steel person. And the only way that he is described as large and stout with piercing eyes and an aggressive chin. I don't know how a chin can be aggressive, but I did my best to narrate his part of the story with as aggressive a chin as I could sound. And so that's all that we get of Mr. Halliday. And the thing is, he's American. Like, who really knows why he finds himself in London? Likely on business, but that's an assumption that is not explicitly said. And the thing is, his lines, and I say lines just because of my background in theater, his dialogue, his words are really bad. Well, they were just really hard to get through. I mean, as far as character development goes, this is a dad. This is a father. And granted, his daughter is in her 30s. She was 31 or 2 or something. And she was stabbed to death after being chloroformed on a passenger train. And in the narration, there is no emotion from this gentleman. And there is no speaking about a lack of emotion either. The words that he says could have just it could have just come from a police report. What I think I rather would have read was Poirot reviewing a police report where Mr. Halliday was interviewed and gathering all the same information. I mean, the stuff that Halliday talks about, he talks about the train routes, he talks about his daughter's schedule, he talks about her jewelry, he talks about her estate, and it is all just info dump nonsense that could have been in a police report instead. And so when Poirot goes to see Halliday for the first time, I think it could have been pretty cool if he was shaken up and emotional and, gave a little bit more tidbits on all of these things instead of just this cut, dry, boring account of her, of her day-to-day schedule. I think that was an opportunity that was missed.
Yeah, and when I was reading it, when I got to this part with Mr. Halliday, I thought, okay, he's not emotional because enough time has passed. But then later on in the story, I realized it's been a day.
Yeah,
the crime happened the previous day. And the most emotion he shows is he calls the murderer a damned scoundrel.
Right? There hasn't even been a funeral for her yet.
Miffed. Yeah.
And there's no
He's just
mention
a
of that
little,
either.
he's a little miffed. That's
Right.
all.
He's a little miffed. He is proud of himself for legally arranging her money such that, her spouse, that they're about to have a legal separation such that her spouse wouldn't get her money, and he likes that he did that. But it was interesting that of all the things to talk about and pride yourself on, especially when your daughter was murdered yesterday, that's kind of what he says. And so I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I had a hard time with Mr. Halliday to to wrap that up, I guess.
Well, I do think that maybe part of his purpose was to cast some suspicion both toward the son-in-law and the count.
Yes,
He kind of
perhaps because he
breathed
was
them
withholding
up. But
information. Yeah, he was withholding
yeah,
information. I still think it could have been done a different way.
it totally could have. Yes. So then we get to, what is he? Inspector Jap.
Is he an inspector or just a cop?
What is he? He's a cop. He might be an inspector. Maybe it doesn't say in here.
But Jap.
I don't know. Anyway, Jap. He appears in several of the Poirot novels.
Okay.
So he's a recurring character.
It is Inspector Jap.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
It's Inspector Jap. So he is at Halliday's house when Poirot is there. And we get to know him a little bit. It says he's an old friend of ours and greeted Poirot with a sort of affectionate contempt. I like that.
Uh-huh.
They don't love each other.
Right. At the same time, though, I think they kind of do.
They kind of do. But they kind of they needle each other, I guess.
Yes, they absolutely do.
Yeah.
It's a relationship where they pick at each other. At the same time, though, I think that secretly they really like that the other person is there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like, especially in this story, maybe because it's a short story instead of a novel where there's a lot more space to develop things, I feel like Jap was really used as a foil to Poirot in here.
Okay, and
foil,
what is a foil?
Which is a character that basically is there as a contrast to Poirot. He's there to show the way Poirot doesn't investigate things, because that's the way Jap investigates things. Jap is all about going out. He rides the trains to all the towns. He talks to all the people. He sees all the things. And Poirot sits in his room, wrapped up in a blanket, trying not to get sick.
Really? That's part of that? I love that.
Yeah. And he just thinks. And by the time Jap gets back, Poirot knows exactly where he's been and who he's talked to.
Oh, I love that.
Just from his thinking. So I really think he's set up as a foil just to show you the different methods and how they actually come to different conclusions. Also, I thought it was interesting how as soon as they see Jap, he says, who do you think it was? Like he's already jumped to conclusions, like it's either this person or this person, and Poirot doesn't jump to conclusions.
No, because he gets to think through it first.
Oh yeah, he's got to think.
No, I love that. So we in literature we use a foil. I mean, as Chrissy said, to demonstrate what something isn't so that the reader can better understand what it is. I mean, if we want to talk about more broad terms, like if we have a person who is really self-righteous and wants to do all the right things, sometimes to really hammer that point home, we bring in another character who is absolutely not righteous to provide that contrast to better understand the first character.
Right.
And so, yeah, as far as the different, methods of gathering info and arriving at conclusions, I absolutely agree that Jap is there to be a foil for Poirot and his methods. The next big player in this story is the maid. To be perfectly honest, I didn't get a lot from the maid, and spoiler alert, it's the maid. Right. So the maid is another person. What is her name? She's a
Jane.
no, but like her actual name, Gracie
Oh, it's like
Kidd.
Gracie Kidd.
Right. So she's this like con woman, Gracie Kidd, parading around as a maid. And so she's there. She's I guess is she the one who thought of this, or is like who thought of this plot and the way that the whole thing would work with the body ending up like in the completely different place and
I'm
throwing the knife
guessing
out the
that she
window?
is.
I don't think that she did.
Yeah.
I don't think that she came up with that. I think that she just did it.
Well, because her accomplice is the jewel thief.
Right.
Spoiler alert. Uh, so I don't know. She kind of seems like she might be the mastermind behind that, but I don't know.
Right. Hard to say.
Hard to say
But
because we never actually see her accomplice. We just hear about him from Jap.
yeah, like as a
Yeah.
renowned jewel thief, and they've been cahooting together. And so the maid, when she's first interviewed, she comes across as emotionless and just distant, even though some of the words that she's saying in my interpretation were not so much that.
Mm-hmm.
But because this is a short story and because I didn't have background, previous background on Agatha Christie or how she writes, because I haven't read her stuff before, I was like, oh, she's emotionless and whatever else. This is important. And it was important because she's masquerading,
Mm-hmm.
which is fun. It's super fun. She's the one who wore the victim's clothes and made sure to like tip a person to establish an alibi or establish a story on where the person was appearing as a way to throw off the trail. Like she's the person
Mm-hmm.
who did all of that. And
And
so
she was the last one to see. Well, and she's the one who saw the man in the carriage with the victim,
that's
supposedly.
right,
Yeah.
the one to
So it's all her story that is leading their suspicions towards some mysterious man.
right when there is no man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or there was a short jewel thief man. I don't
right,
know.
or it was just someone
Yeah.
else.
Yeah.
So that's what I got from the maid. I mean, her part in this, I mean, she is the murderer, but as far as the actual whodunit story, the investigation, she's not in it a lot.
Mm-mm.
She has a pretty quick testimony with some embellishments that's not real that we come to learn and whatever else, but she's not actually in this a lot. She doesn't say a lot. She's not like there a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
her story, her testimony or whatever is important enough to lead people down a different path of investigation.
And I don't know if you picked up on this as you were reading it, but the way she is the one who brings up what the victim was wearing.
Oh, I
Like
guess I missed
doesn't
that.
Poirot doesn't ask. She says, "You know what she was wearing, right? Or you know how she was dressed,"
Right,
and
as a way
brings
to
it
bring
up.
importance to that.
Yeah. So that's suspicious. But I think that's kind of what tips Poirot off
Is
to her.
her pointing too strong of a finger toward the appearance of this person, the clothing
Uh-huh.
and such? Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I
Yeah.
missed it. Well, there it is. And who is the final like big character in this story?
Our final big character is the narrator, who is named all of, I think, two times in this story. His name is Hastings. And for people who are familiar with the Poirot books, they will be familiar with Hastings because he shows up a lot. But in this story, he's just kind of there. And he's there. I feel like he's just there as a person for Poirot to explain things to,
Uh-huh.
to
Right,
and to kind of show off his smarts.
to provide Poirot, like, I mean, like you said, someone to talk to so that he's not talking
Yeah,
to himself as he goes
right.
through his line of logic.
But the funny thing about Poirot is he does not usually explain things as he's going through the investigation. Other people will jump to conclusions and say things to him, and he'll say, "Oh, don't be so hasty," or whatever, and then at the end he just unloads it all.
Oh,
It's
that's
kind of a formula thing.
interesting. So when he's talking, he's not processing. He's just like reviewing. And then yeah, when he is
Like
talking, he's not figuring
he's
something
already
out.
figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's already figured it all out in his brain.
I love
It
that.
seems like, although, yeah. And then, so Hastings is just kind of there to be that guy who helps him with things when he needs help with things, and kind of an assistant, I guess, and also to give him somebody to talk to.
Yeah. And so just in this story, outside of the context of everything else, how is he actually written?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like just little bits and pieces of his character are dropped into different books. Like, I feel like he was like a retired military guy. I feel like, I've read so many of the books and I don't remember all the details, but I feel like there's something where he lived in the West Indies or something. I don't even remember. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, he's got a whole big backstory that you just kind of get little pieces of it as you read all of the Poirot stories.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
in this story by itself, like,
You
who
get a whole lot of
knows?
nonsense.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Who
Although,
knows?
one thing I noticed was that, like, when Hastings first comes and talks to Poirot and they're talking about the murder, Hastings is the one who has all the information about the victim's husband and marriage.
That's
Like,
true. He knows stuff about
Poirot
the
doesn't know about him.
count.
So he knows stuff about some people. It doesn't say how he knows this, but he knows it.
Mm-hmm.
He knows about it. He doesn't know about the count. Poirot knows about the count. Hastings knows about the Honorable Mr. Rupert Carrington.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
he knows all about him. And he says something about, like, he knows that their marriage isn't great and all of this stuff.
And that they're about to arrange a legal separation. He knows that too.
Right. Like, where he gets this information, we have no idea. But we just have to trust that he tells the truth.
Right. And yeah. So
Yeah.
that's like those are the characters in this story. I feel it's important to point out that except for a couple words here or there once, nobody has any physical description.
Mm-hmm.
Poirot does not.
Yeah.
I mean, it talks about his green eyes, which is great.
Yeah.
Hastings absolutely doesn't.
No.
With Mr. Halliday, it's just that one statement that I read with the piercing eyes and the aggressive chin. And then, like, the maid, like, we know the clothing that she was wearing, but
Right.
we don't really know how, like, we don't really know her, what she is conveying through, like, posture or mannerisms or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It is all depending on the dialogue, which we will get into in the next episode. And that is it for today. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Writing in the Tiny House. If you are interested in supporting this show, and if you are interested in following me on social media, all of that information can be found or at least accessed in the content of the show notes of this episode. Also, for every guest that we have on Writing in the Tiny House, all of their professional information, all of their social media stuff, and the website to their business or whatever it is they do is also found in the description in the show notes. So thank you so much for tuning in for today's episode, and we hope to see you again soon.